For over 30 years, The Legend of Zelda has continued to reign as one of the most enduring game series of all time. This in no small part is due to its music, originally composed by Koji Kondo. As the series has evolved, many things have changed, but one thing that has remained constant over the years are the famous Zelda dungeons. Well, mostly. While the dungeon music for early Zelda games has been shared across different levels, it wasn't until Link's Awakening in 1993 that individual music representing each dungeon theme was included. This tradition continued with nearly every Zelda release and resulted in some of the most interesting and immersive examples of thematic music. Who could forget the creepy, unnerving sounds of Ocarina of Time's Forest Temple or the beautiful gamelan-inspired music of Skyward Sword's Ancient Cistern? Before we discuss the latest entry in the Zelda series, I invite you to please like, comment, and most importantly subscribe to my channel so I can continue publishing videos exploring the link between video games and music. You can also ring the bell to receive notifications of new content. Due to my professional responsibilities as a music teacher and the fact that I have a new baby at home, I'm not really able to post very often, but with your support by liking and subscribing, I can focus more effort on creating these videos. The Zelda dungeons have brought us tons of wonderful music over the years, so it was highly anticipated what composers Manaka Kataoka, Yasuake Iata, and Hajime Wakai would bring to the table for 2017's Breath of the Wild. Overall, the game was a monumental success, winning many Game of the Year awards and being hailed as one of, if not the greatest game ever made. Of course, like many great games, there are bound to be criticisms, and Breath of the Wild was no exception. Fans of past Zelda dungeons were disappointed in the new structure, which involves small mini-dungeons in the form of shrines. The shrines themselves are visually alike and feature the exact same music, with the exception of the Shrine of Resurrection Temple at the end of the Champion's Ballad DLC. This led many fans to consider the shrines monotonous and repetitive as compared to the unique dungeon themes of earlier games in the series. The only exceptions are the version of Zelda dungeons known in Breath of the Wild as the Divine Beasts. Unlike every other dungeon in the series, the Divine Beasts do not follow the traditional formula of linear progression or acquiring a special item that is required to defeat the boss. The Divine Beasts can also be completed in any order and whenever the player decides to challenge them during the game, or even not at all. The structure of the Divine Beasts also differs from traditional Zelda dungeons. Although there is a map, progression through the beasts are made through the activation of 5 terminals that must be located by solving puzzles and defeating enemies. Once all the terminals have been activated, Link can access the central terminal and face the boss to complete the area. And, unlike previous Zelda games, Link cannot enter the Divine Beasts again for the remainder of the game upon completion. Since the Divine Beasts differ so much from other dungeons in the Zelda series, the music of each area also follows a different structural format that is presented in 6 linear phases. When Link enters each of the Divine Beasts, the first phase of background music begins and will continue until Link activates the first terminal after the map terminal. The music of this phase is very ambiguous and ominous and does not contain any melodic or rhythmic content. The instrumentation is also similar across all 4 Divine Beasts, featuring a combination of piano motifs and chords played with synthesized sounds representing some kind of electronic noises. The compositional style, however, does differ between dungeons, with Va NABORIS and Va RUDANIA focusing on the lower piano range, and Va RUTA and Va MEDOH containing piano notes in the high register. The music will continue for as long as Link takes to find and access the first main terminal after receiving the map. This is known as adaptive music, or music that changes based on the actions of the character. It's a big departure from the music of previous Zelda dungeons, as the majority of background music does not change regardless of Link's actions. The second phase of the Divine Beast's background music becomes individually stylized to the specific area. When Link activates the first main terminal, this phase begins immediately and develops itself in subsequent phases by adding musical content and instruments to the overall texture. The beginning of Va NABORIS' main theme, for example, is slow and consists of a series of chord changes highlighted by the electronic sounds of the first phase. Va MEDOH exchanges these sounds with undulating scalar runs by the upper strings, accompanied by a light shaker rhythm. Va RUTA continues with the piano instrumentation of the first phase, but synthesizes it into a rhythm of repeated triplets before beginning a melody on the celesta. The celesta is an instrument similar to the piano, but is meant to sound more like a music box. One of the most famous uses of the celesta is in Peter Tchaikovsky's The Nutcracker, where it is used in the dance of the Sugar Plum Fairy. Va RUDANIA has a definite rhythm of hand drums and metallic percussion combined with chords of a sitar and low piano. This is followed by a panpipe and xylophone melody that is the clearest example of an actual melody among the 4 dungeons. The next 2 phases of the music adds more instrumental content every time Link activates another terminal. Phase 3 of Va NABORIS adds high string chords and a short guitar motif. Phase 4 adds another solo string instrument that sounds similar to a Chinese erhu, which plays a sustained counter melody. In Va MEDOH, Phase 3 continues the previous scale runs by the strings, but changes the melody slightly and adds more low string voices. Phase 4 focuses more on the lower strings performing an upper scale against the motion of the upper strings. Va RUTA makes its alterations in Phase 3 by adding low electronic sounds that produces an unstable and jarring effect when combined with the high celesta. Phase 4 continues the texture of the previous phase, but adds a definite rhythm with light percussion instruments, including hand drums and a shaker. Finally, Va RUDANIA adds a pulsating electronic sound that echoes in and out of the rhythmic texture. The 4th phase adds gong strikes, brass, and short punctuations played by the glockenspiel, also known as the orchestral bells. The fifth and final phase of each dungeon's soundtrack occurs when Link activates the fifth terminal and continues until the center terminal is accessed and the boss fight begins. In all 4 Divine Beasts, the tempo dramatically increases, bringing a sense of urgency to the atmosphere. This is fairly deceptive, however, considering that Link can explore the dungeon indefinitely until the player decides to complete it. Speaking of the boss battles, the music for these sections also relates to each other, which is appropriate considering that all 4 bosses are incarnations of Calamity Ganon. The melodic and rhythmic content are nearly identical. The main difference is how they are orchestrated. Thunderblight Ganon from NABORIS has a melody played by the Erhu, and Windblight Ganon from MEDOH is played by the accordion. This is interesting considering that Cass, the Rito who is a traveling musician, also plays the accordion. Since MEDOH is representative of the Rito tribe, this may or may not be a coincidence. RUDANIA's boss, FIREBLIGHT Ganon, is accompanied by a string instrument that sounds similar to a mandolin and is later joined by brass instruments and a vocal ensemble. Lastly, WATERBLIGHT Ganon's music inside RUTA is played by the combination of what sounds like a glockenspiel and soprano saxophone. Similar to FIREBLIGHT Ganon, the melody adds a brass and vocal ensemble as well. All 4 melodies also contain the famous Ganon theme that is featured prominently throughout the Zelda series. The concept behind Breath of the Wild was to completely revamp a series that many believed had grown too linear and strayed too far from the open world concept presented by the original. In this, the developers succeeded, but the complete alteration of the traditional dungeon structure left many fans disappointed in what was otherwise considered a nearly perfect game. It's understandable that these major changes would receive mixed reactions, but how this new format uses background music is completely unique compared to earlier Zelda games. Maybe this style of adaptive music is what the future of Zelda dungeons will look like. It's hard to predict, but we'll know when Breath of the Wild 2, or whatever title Nintendo comes up with, will be released. Until then, I look forward to discovering that music with all of you. Thanks so much for watching, and please like and subscribe to see new videos. Until next time.